Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Coysh, and I'm the Director of the Digital Infrastructure Department at York University in Toronto, Canada. I'm here with my colleagues, Hilary Barlow, the W.P. Scott Chair in Librarianship, Mojgan Jadidi, Assistant Professor, Lassonde School of Engineering, and Andrea Kosavic, Associate Dean, York University Libraries. In this presentation, Making Connections, Faculty OER Adoption and Attitudes in Relation to UN SDGs, we will discuss the results of an instructor survey designed to surface current OER creation and use, to identify how instructors see the connection between OER and SDGs, and to gauge current barriers preventing instructors from developing OER and incorporating OER into their curricula. Our presentation today is divided into 4 sections. I will begin by discussing York's Open Education Steering Committee, as well as the faculty survey. Hilary and Mojgan will then elaborate on the results and data analysis, and Andrea will round out the presentation by outlining the survey outcomes and future strategies. In this first section of the presentation, I will discuss York's Open Education Steering Committee. The purpose of the Open Education Steering Committee is to engage in broad stakeholder discussions to advance the following goals. Firstly, to provide a forum for discussion and consideration of changes to the system of scholarly recognition for advances in open education. Secondly, to create awareness of open educational practices among York faculty. Thirdly, to coordinate and promote the creation, mobilization, and discovery of OE materials. Finally, to investigate avenues towards adopting open and/or affordable course materials to impact the student experience at York University. The committee is co-chaired by the Dean of Libraries and the Associate Vice President Teaching and Learning. It includes representation from the libraries, Learning Technology Services, Teaching Commons, faculty, the bookstore, and the Copyright Office. 3 working groups were struck to advance the steering committee's mandate, and these were the Open Education Communications Working Group, which is responsible for developing and implementing a university-wide communication strategy. The Open Education Policy and Guidelines Working Group, which is responsible for developing and implementing a university policy, set of guidelines, and process pertaining to OE and OER. And thirdly, the Open Education Recognition and Credentialing Working Group, which is responsible for developing and implementing policy and framework for recognizing and credentialing OER authors and content creators. In order to inform the work of all 3 of these working groups, it was determined that an environmental scan was needed, and a faculty survey was developed to form the basis of this. The survey was modeled after those conducted by McMaster in October 2021 and the University of British Columbia Okanagan, also conducted in 2021. Questions from all 3 working groups were integrated in order to gather the data needed for each group's needs, as well as specific questions surrounding OERs and the UN SDGs. The survey was run from early May until the end of June 2022 and was posted in our learning management system Moodle, as well as on the steering committee's webpage, the library's homepage, within Y-File, York's daily newsletter, social media, and targeted mailings were sent out via the Associate Dean's Teaching and Learning. It was open to all instructors at York, including TAs. We received a total of 121 responses and had representation from all faculties. However, it was not proportional. Nearly half of the respondents were tenured, the next largest group of participants were contract faculty, and about a quarter were tenure track. A small proportion of TAs and librarians also participated. Of the faculty, the largest group were professorial stream, with over a quarter of them within this teaching stream. Hilary will now share the results and data analysis of the survey.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Hilary Barlow, and I'm the W.P. Scott Chair in Librarianship at York University. And I'm going to tell you about some of the results from our survey and what we can glean from them. So in our survey of York University faculty, we asked 3 questions about United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The first one was a Likert scale question on a strongly agree to strongly disagree scale, asking respondents to react to the statement, "There is interest at York in contributing to the UNESCO OER mandate." And the results show that there is an interest, and nearly 30% of respondents strongly agreed that there is an interest, and about 32.5% said that they agreed. Our second question, respondents were asked to agree or disagree with a statement, I have created an OER aligned with a UN Sustainable Development Goal. And here the results were more mixed. 16.2% strongly agreed that they had, while 13.5% agreed. 33.8% neither agreed nor disagreed, suggesting that they weren't sure off the top of their head if they had created such an OER. I'll show you a bit of a breakdown. So this is the responses to the same two questions I just showed you, where respondents were asked to react to the statement that there is interest at York about the UNESCO OER mandate, and also the statement I have created an OER that aligns with the Sustainable Development Goal. And so at the top we have the one about interest in the UNESCO mandate, and this is divided by, so the light blue contains TAs and contract faculty, dark blue is professorial stream faculty, and the orange is teaching stream. To be either professorial or teaching stream, you have to be tenure track or tenured. And you can see in the upper graph interest across all groups, but very sustained interest among teaching stream faculty. None of those who responded said they disagreed with there being interest at York. At the bottom, we also see people of different constituencies responding all sorts of ways. But one thing we can see is there is the teaching and professorial stream faculty. Again, everyone in teaching and professorial stream would be tenure track or tenured, much more likely to strongly agree that they had created an OER aligning with the Sustainable Development Goal, not as much the case among the TAs and contract faculty. So the third question pertaining to UN SDGs was an open-ended one. Respondents could type, put in custom text, answering in more detail. And the question was, if you created an OER aligned with the Sustainable Development Goal, which SDGs were represented, and how did the OER align with the goal? So our survey overall had 121 responses, and many of the questions were optional. So this particular question, we had 28 responses. Not surprisingly for educators, a lot of the respondents had quality education. You can see that in this little word cloud. This is representing the most commonly repeated words in the answers, and quality education is very large. So of those that mentioned quality education, a little more than half were teaching stream, and the rest were professorial stream, and it was half and half tenured and tenure track. While quality education came out on top, almost all SDGs were mentioned by at least one person. After quality education, the most commonly cited SDGs in our survey were reduced inequalities and peace, justice, and strong institutions. So here are some actual text responses from this open-ended question that I just mentioned. These two responses mention SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. So as you can see, even before we started reaching out, faculty already creating courses in OER that are deeply connected to the goals. Here are some more highlighted responses from that same question. SDG 10, reduced inequalities, was one of the SDGs most cited by respondents, and SDG 5, gender equality, was also mentioned by multiple respondents. So respondents could fill out the survey completely anonymously, but at the end we did give space if they wanted to give their name or their contact information. So that's why some of these are attributed and some aren't. So you can see this response by Dr. Svetanka Karagyozova, who is assistant professor of economics. It's a lot about creating an open textbook about microinsurance and the importance of microinsurance and its relevance to reduce inequalities. Another highly cited SDG was number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. So here are two different responses related to that SDG. At the top, Eric Armstrong, associate professor at the Department of Theater. There's some materials inclusive of LGBTQ2A+ and global majority populations. And this anonymous respondent mentions the Canadian Framework of Reference for Languages, which promotes a common language competency scale. And we also wanted to know what was preventing faculty from engaging with OER. So this is another open-ended question where faculty could type their own custom responses, asking what challenges do you experience / anticipate with using or adapting OER. And Dr. Jody Martin, who's a member of our Open Education Steering Committee, went through the responses and found patterns and grouped them according to major themes. And as you can see here, faculty said that they experienced challenges finding the right OER, finding OER of high quality, and issues with just having enough time to find relevant material. Faculty also cited a lack of awareness about resources and where to find them, and concerns about proper credit and lack of peer review. There are also faculty respondents who were very practiced in finding and using OER and who knew just where to find OER relevant to their field. Professor Tamara Kelly here mentions Howard Hughes Medical Institute and Buffalo Case Studies and CourseSource, and also making their own OER. And this anonymous respondent says they've been making OER since before they were even called OER. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Mojgan Jadidi.
Thank you, Hilary. Hello, everyone. My name is Mojgan Jadidi. I'm Assistant Professor of Geomatic Engineering at La Sonde School of Engineering at York University. Through this survey, we want to know how faculty members perceive OER compared to traditional academic texts that might assign in their courses. Faculty were prompted to react to these three statements according to the Likert scale. We are a more affordable alternative to commercial textbook. We are a more accessible, flexible alternative to commercial textbook. We are just as peer-reviewed and reliable as a commercial textbook. As you can see in the result, faculty are responded very positively to affordability, accessibility, and flexibility of the OER when compared to the commercial textbook. However, there was some concern about reliability and lack of the peer review. Also, we want to know if and how faculty engage with the Creative Commons licensing. Respondents were asked about their general familiarity with CC licensing and if they have assigned previously in their own work. While 3/4 of the respondents were at least somewhat familiar with the CC licensing, knowing that a quarter saying they are very familiar, only around 40% of the respondents applied CC license to their own work. Respondents could also choose other and write some detailed answer to that. We find it out when typing out the responses from our survey result. Faculty varied in their engagement with the open licensing. Some had not had an opportunity to learn more about the topic and make it part of their practice. And one other was very familiar with the licensing, but tended to use licenses more common in their field, like MIT licensing or Afro General Public licenses. Also, the steering committee was very interested to know how creation of the OER could be intensified through the tenure promotion process. That's why we are asked our faculty member about this to gauge their interest and to see if TMP policies regarding OER already existed in their department or not. Some respondents say OER were part of the tenure promotion policy in their department, with 15% saying OER could be considered as the evidence of the teaching contribution. Nonetheless, another 15% say no, and 55% were unsure about this. This result suggests that there is some inclusion of the OER in TMP policies, though it is not widespread or widely understood from the different units. Like we did another dig down on that, knowing that what is the distribution of the those faculty in which they say yes to their nature of the stream. Based on our survey, we saw that the people who say yes, 87% tenure professional stream and the 72% tenure track teaching stream believe that the creation of the OER or usage of these resources should be considered as evidence of the teaching and research contribution. Respondents were asked also what would incentivize the creation of the OER on their department or faculty, and given an array of the possible incentive to choose. They could select multiple answers and input their own answer in the other field. Through that, out of 120 responses to Australia overall, 111 faculty responded to this question. The results indicate that tenure and promotion could be huge incentive to incorporating OER. Following recognition as a teaching contribution toward TMP, the most desired incentive were access to expert staff and also grant funding. Other TMP-related options were also highly selected by respondents. And now is the time to hand this presentation to my colleague, Andrea, who is going to highlight some key survey outcomes and what is next. Thank you.
In this closing section, I'll recap our survey outcomes and outline some future strategies. Let's look at the key outcomes presented earlier in this talk. With respect to the connection between OER and SDGs, our hypothesis was that very few faculty would go beyond SDG 4, but we were pleasantly surprised that instructors were already seeing the connection between OER and many of the other SDGs, where about 30% of respondents were creating OER aligned with SDGs. We observed that those who are heavily involved in OER see the connection across multiple SDGs. With respect to biases and barriers to OER implementation in the COVID era, we noted that faculty responded very positively to the affordability, accessibility, and flexibility of OER when compared to commercial textbooks. There was some concern about reliability and lack of peer review. With respect to instructors' copyright and intellectual property concerns, we saw that 3/4 of our respondents were familiar with Creative Commons, but only 40% applied Creative Commons licensing to their own work. In the area of tenure and promotion, we saw that most respondents were unsure about the role of OER in tenure and promotion, but 15% believed that OER could count towards evidence of teaching contribution. Let's look at some lessons learned with a focus on key challenges. While time, workload, quality of OER, and recognition were raised by respondents in the survey, two key challenges identified from our survey, and would come as no surprise to this audience, were awareness of OER and finding OER. In summary, there is a lack of understanding around how to find OER, and those who have more experience with searching for OER found OER to be fragmented across multiple locations. There is a lack of faculty awareness that they are actually creating and using OER within the course of their teaching. In thinking on these responses, we noted faculty may not realize that they do not need to use an OER to create an OER. For some of our instructors, it may also be helpful for them to note that the creation of repositories and pathfinders documenting OERs are also OERs in their own right and should be recognized as such. We can now look at different strategies to help raise awareness and engage instructors. This slide outlines 4 areas that can help to bolster instructor engagement and address the key challenges we identified, which are awareness of OER and finding OER. Let's start with university SDG communications. There is much to learn in looking at how the university communicates its contributions to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. Universities are leveraging the ways libraries have led their advocacy campaigns and are investing a lot of effort in their SDG campaigns. We can benefit from this campaigning by identifying and highlighting OER that advance the SDGs and intentionally including this in our campaigning. These communications can link to helpful instructional websites and programming that address the challenge of finding OER. Funding and awards to raise awareness, the next category. At York University, the AVP Teaching and Learning offers funding for teaching and learning initiatives, as there is great collaboration between the libraries and the Associate Vice President of Teaching and Learning. A program has been developed that requires recipients of funding to develop and share project-related OER by depositing them in our institutional repository. Programming has been developed to support this requirement, which teaches faculty to find, reuse, and create OER for broader distribution. We could be expanding on this partnership by looking at other existing campus awards across the faculties and advocating that questions be added where applicable to the applications process that asks faculty to reflect on how their work advances SDGs and open education when applying for these awards. This can help to create an intentional connection for faculty between SDGs and open education more broadly. New awards can be creating further opportunities as well. Now, looking at awards to build tenure and promotion recognition. Creating opportunities for faculty to showcase their advancement of open education and SDGs in our funding and award structure in the university allows a pathway for recognizing open education and SDGs indirectly in tenure and promotion files. This can hopefully lead to greater recognition of advancing open education amongst tenure committees overall, with the potential of more formalized integration into the tenure and promotion process more broadly across campus. And finally, external pathways to OER discovery. Now, this idea would require broader collaboration to explore and to implement, but it could help to yield greater awareness. The idea comes from making OER discoverable where faculty are conducting their research or staying current in their respective field. This could take many forms, such as featured sections in institutional repositories and in broader subject-based repositories such as Archive, REPAC, SSRN, and MLA Commons. There are lots of opportunities in this particular strategy. And finally, I'd like to thank you very much for attending our presentation. Your thoughts and questions are most welcome. Thanks very much.